because we're filming in the East End. It's like, yay, alrighty, good. It's good fun, actually.
Are you a huge Dad's Army fan?
Yeah, I grew up with Doug's Army. Never remember a moment where it wasn't on and wasn't fun for everyone to watch. Yeah, and latterly came to work with Jimmy Perry. I met him via Ronnie Barker because I was doing in 1999. I produced and directed Two Ronnies Night, which was a celebration of the two Ronnies. BBC Two had done nights. BBC One hadn't done one, so we pitched the idea originally for Two Ronnies Night to BBC Two. Peter Salmon found out on BBC One and said, if you're doing a Two Ronnies Night, it belongs on BBC One because that's where the two Ronnies were. Working with Ronnie Barker, I've been working with Ronnie Barker. BBC Two were looking for 10-minute episodes of something. And the head of light entertainment at the time, Mike Lego, who I'd worked with on Noel's House Party, suggested that the little films they did within Two Ronnies might be quite fun to turn into these 10-minute things that were needed by BBC Two. And that was The Worm That Turned and The Phantom Raspberry Blower, and all those elements could be turned into standalone bits. So he set me the task of watching all of these various things and editing them on paper and liaising with Ronnie Barker about how they might be brought to time to produce these 10-minute bits. So I spent a few months watching them and liaising with Ronnie, and we chat on the phone, and we got to know each other quite well, and would either have exactly the same notes or the complete polar opposite notes. By the way, it kind of, we sort of got on, we got to know each other and had an appreciation of each other's work, obviously me much more than him. And he then, we pitched these 10-minute ideas to BBC Two, who didn't want them for whatever reason. And then they said, but if you can do a Two Ronnies Night, because theme nights were then a new thing that were emerging, then we'd love to have that. So we went away and thought about that, and then came back and pitched that. And then Peter Salmon, who was a controller of BBC One at the time, said, hang on a minute, if you're doing a Two Ronnies Night, then I want it on BBC One, because the Two Ronnies were always on BBC One.
Yeah.
So then I had to go and pitch the idea of a night to Ronnie Barker, who had no idea what they were and wasn't particularly keen. So I chatted him through them, and he said to me, I don't like surprises. So what I have to know is exactly what's going to be. So I told him, I thought, great. I know and worship Ronnie Barker from viewing him from being a kid. My father made a couple of films with him, so I had there was a connection which helped. And so I just said, look, they really desperately want to have a Two Ronnies Night, and this will involve 2 hours on BBC One prime time before the news and then after the news, and it's ours to do with what we like. That's the pitch. And he said, okay, so what are they going to make me do? And I said, they're going to make you do nothing that you don't want to do, and they will probably want to woo you a bit to persuade you to do it. And he said, fine, okay, let them woo me. So the next thing was a big lunch, which was set up for Michael Lego, who'd just taken over as head of LE, Paul Jackson, who was, I think, controller of entertainment at that point, Ronnie Barker, and me. So I felt, like a tiny person amongst giants. This lunch rather, happened, and we turned up at this very lovely restaurant. And Ronnie knew exactly what was going to happen, what they were going to ask, and what was expected, because I'd briefed him. They had no idea that I'd briefed him to that extent. We went around the table, and the waiter was, what would you like to drink? And everyone was being on best behavior because it was Ronnie Barker. It was, I'll have a mineral water, I'll have a still mineral water, I'll have a sparkling mineral water, and all that. And it came to Ronnie, and he said, I'd like a large glass of claret, please. And then it came to me, and I said, well, I'll have a large glass of claret, thank you. And then, of course, the others were immediately, oh, me too, I'll have a large glass of claret. Then that kind of that set the scene for that lunch. And he said, "Well, I don't want to ruin my lunch by not being able to enjoy it. So tell me what you want." And they sort of pitched the idea to him, and he said, "Fine, okay, I'll do it." At which point there was great celebration. And he said, "But one condition, that this man here produces it." That was me. And at that point, I was in my early 30s, and was slightly floored. I had no idea he was going to say that, and was slightly thrown. So that then came to pass that I produced and directed two Ronnies, and we got to know each other very well over the progress of that show. And he had very well known within the world of comedy and entertainment at that point, very big summer parties at his mill in Oxfordshire. And he started to invite me. So every year I would go along in the summer to this great gathering of people who he'd known and knew and worked with and liked. And I think I went 3 or 4 times, and each time I ended up sitting between David Renwick and Jimmy Perry, two of British comedy's greatest writers, both of whose company I really, really enjoyed, and just sat and listened to the stories from both of them, and just marveled at the fact that I was there.
Yeah.
Real imposter syndrome stuff. So cut to many years later, my dear friend Tom Weber and I were chatting at BAFTA one sort of rainy, probably Tuesday, thinking, what are we going to do with our careers? When are we going to get a proper job? Those lulls in your life when you're not working. And Tom said to me, well, look, there are some episodes of Dad's Army that have never been shown, or they've been shown, but they've been lost.
Yeah.
And I was a bit intrigued. So I thought, well, Dad's Army is the biggest thing, in British comedy. And, there's Faulty Towers and Only Fools and Horses, but Dad's Army is right up there with them. And I thought, well, that just can't be so. And he said, yeah, there were these episodes. They lost the whole of series 2, and they've recovered several of them, but not 3 episodes, which have never been found. Why don't we pitch those and try and make those? And he didn't know that I'd known Jimmy Perry from having met him at Ronnie's parties. And subsequently, Jimmy and I had done some writing on some bits and pitched those to BBC, and never quite got anything away, but had got on really well. And we'd shared a few dinners and much wine and enjoyed each other's company. So I thought, hang on a minute, childhood me who loved Dad's Army, and grown-up me who worshipped both Jimmy Perry and Ronnie and Dad's Army, was like, this is heaven. Because, and also it's a multi-camera sitcom, of which I'd done quite a lot at that point and loved as a genre. And I thought, this is just amazing. Can this possibly be true that this hasn't happened? And we did some more research into it, and it was probably 2 or 3 years from our meeting there to Dad's Army happening, because there's a lot of involvement of the estate of Jimmy, who died at that point, and David Croft, and where we were going to sell it. And the BBC, I think, had just done the lost episodes of, not the lost episodes, the BBC had just done their remakes for the comedy celebration of Porridge, another Ronald Barker show, of course, Are You Being Served, to Feathersby Park. And I think the BBC felt, or BBC Two felt, that they'd done that, and there was some criticism amongst the papers that BBC was rehashing old stuff. Why didn't they make new stuff? So the BBC eventually turned them down, despite Shane Allen sort of pushing them. So we went to UK TV, where we both knew separate people, and UK TV were very keen, and came back to yes, we'd love them. And so from sitting in BAFTA one Tuesday afternoon and to making them was about 3 years, I think, with the negotiations with the estates of Jimmy and David, and a dear friend of mine, Art Dyson, who happened to have the same agent who looked after the estate, so that helped. But then there's lots of concerns about, are you going to remake them exactly as they are? And an early request from the estate was, will you remake them as if they'd been found in a biscuit tin, you know, at the bottom of someone's garden or in the attic of someone's house, and they've then shown. But to do that truthfully, it would have been black and white and 4:3.
Yeah.
And the feeling from the channel certainly was a modern audience wouldn't really want that, wouldn't be able to relate to it particularly well. So we ought to do it in color and widescreen. And a part of me at the time was a bit shocked and horrified by this suggestion, you know, Dad's Army. But of course, most of us watched most of Dad's Army, as most of it was in color. I think it went to color between series 2 and 3. And I thought, look, whatever they want, they're paying for it. You know, if they want it to be in color and widescreen, then we should do that. And then a lot of negotiation followed with the rights to the show, the rights to the set, the rights to the music. Who do we cast? And there's a lot in all of that, as you well know, Jerry James, because you were in it.
It was just magical to see it all come together. It was so special.
It was special, wasn't it? It was, and I say that as a participant, because you know, nothing to do with me. I mean, it was something to do with me, but it wasn't. You know, I didn't write it. I didn't create Dad's Army. I just did my bit to honour the people that had made it. You know, David and Jimmy, and it was just a total privilege to do that. It was, you know, we were keen, having decided that it was going to be done 4:3 in colour. Having sort of accepted that, because that's the criteria you're given, I then thought, this is fine. I can buy that because I understand the reasons that they're asking for that. But I want the rest of it, everything possibly, to be as genuine and as faithful to the original as we possibly could make it. And we went to great lengths. We really did. We found this fantastic guy, Taff Gillingham, who did lots of army recreations and lots of faithful costumes and weaponry. I said to Candy, Julian Jones, who produced, because that was a difficult time, because I originally hoped to produce and direct, and I had many other things going on and I couldn't. And the project lost a bit of momentum, and the channel said, we've got this fantastic producer, Candy Julian Jones, who we'd like to suggest, and she came on board. And we had this bizarre situation where Candy was interviewing me and I was interviewing her at the same time. And it could have been really rather difficult because I was exec producer and she was producer, but I was also just the director and she was a producer. So she's the boss and then I'm the boss. But you know, anyway, we met in a Pret and got on brilliantly immediately. And I've worked with her subsequently. And I just thought she was this perfect person because she's a proper grown-up producer who totally got the project, who completely understood what was needed, and who just made it happen. And so we got this incredible group of people. She suggested David Ferris, who's this amazing designer she'd worked with, I'd not worked with, and was delighted to have on board because he did an astonishing job of recreating the set. We found Taff, who came up with not only a lot of the physical costumes, but also the platoon. Because I said to Candy, we haven't got time and money, presumably, to train a group of actors to be soldiers, to be the rest of the platoon. Because although you often see the full platoon, but actually the key characters are the front line of that platoon. There are a lot of other soldiers within the show who you need to be there, but you don't know.
Yeah.
And it's not fair on a bunch of supporting cast who are new to come in and expect to learn army drill and all the rest of it. So we managed to find Taff, who had this ready-made platoon of people who were experts in army drill at the time and who had the right clothes, and brought them in. And then Catherine Willis, who's a casting director I've worked with several times, who's just phenomenal. And Candy was very happy with, and Tom was very happy with. And Catherine came up with this extraordinary cast to do the show. And I remember emailing all of them and saying, you know, before the read, my name's Ben, I'm directing Dad's Army, you know, such a privilege. Before we meet at the read, if there's anything you want to talk about, please do get in touch. Every single one of them, wherever they were in the world, got immediately back in touch and said lovely things about how pleased they were to be doing it. Kevin McNally was in LA, of course, doing something very glamorous. but came back immediately, as did Rob Bathurst, who I'd known. Kevin Eldon came back, I think, with 3 or 4 pages of questions about James and about the very, lots of different approaches to it, but everyone with one, consistent note came back with huge enthusiasm and love for the original and a complete willingness and desire to make it as faithful to the original as possible, which is an amazing place to start.
Such a joy to work with you on that. I've seen Kevin and Robert, and they were so.
In bed, I believe, Jerry Jane.
Huh? In bed?
In bed, in the underground station.
Yeah. Oh, it's so funny. And they were both just so wonderful, so welcoming. And every single time they spoke, there was always a nugget of wisdom to take away from it. And I think also the live audience. I'd never been in front of a live audience before, so that experience was really exciting. Yeah, and
it was coming onto the set for the first time was really weird, because knowing it so well, all of us, and I know you felt that as a cast member, and every single cast member felt it, and every crew member felt it. Coming onto that set was like, ooh, real goosebumps.
It was.
Because we've all grown up and known it so well. And then rehearsing, which was great, and camera rehearsing, and there's always that pressure that you may have a week to rehearse in your rehearsal room, but you've then got only 2.5 hours to actually grab that moment live with the studio audience, and then you've got your camera rehearsal. But so many special moments, getting onto the set and seeing the set. And then I think for me, because I'm aware with cast, with a studio sitcom, it's daunting. It's all the sort of, you have the rehearsal of a theatre play, but then you've got basically the performance time to capture the whole thing. So there's an enormous amount of pressure to get it done in front of the audience. You don't have an audience at any other point. And for this project particularly, because the SIG tune is so much part of all of our lives and our histories, in the afternoon dress rehearsal, I remember playing it in and saying to them, well, come and watch, because we recreated the opening titles as well. We had to with the new cast. And playing the opening titles to Dad's Army, knowing we were making it, or making an attempt at it, was just one of the most extraordinary moments of my life to date. Saying Run VT and on come the Dad's Army titles. It was like, oh my goodness. And hearing that music and knowing we were then going to come through and have a go ourselves. I think Rob Bathurst put it beautifully when he said, we are the understudies.
Yes.
We are the understudies who've been put on to do it, and we're going to do our best as the understudies. And
that was
yeah, it's beautifully put.
It's such an honor. I said this on the job, how exciting it would have been to take it on tour.
Yeah, I mean, we all of us felt that, and I would still love to do it, and I think there would very possibly be an opportunity to. I think that one of the difficult things was we then got into, so we lost the momentum of the moment. I think we all actually underestimated the momentum that we gained by doing it, and the amount of interest there was in it. And I think there was a lot of nervousness around. Remember the first night, for example, we had obviously the channel were there. The Dad's Army Appreciation Society were there.
Yes.
There were people from the estate of Jimmy and David were there. There were people, Gordon Peters, who's now no longer with us, who'd been in the original show, was there. There was a lot of pressure on that opening night. And I think at the time, you're so busy making it, it's almost hard to realize the effect on other people. And I think I think I can say now how well we did it. It was very faithful to the original. We did do a lot of work to make sure it was. I remember talking to Tom and the estate early on about how important it was for me to get the programmer's broadcast scripts. And there was some confusion about what they are, but basically the BBC keeps a record in script form of the program, not just as it was made, but as how it went out. So you know what it ended up being edited like. And for one of the episodes, there was an off-air audio recording. So the sources I had for the program varied hugely. We made 3 shows, and within those 3 shows, one of them had an audio off-air recording, which is the ultimate, really, bar having the actual physical footage. So we knew exactly what was said and what went out in terms of the script for one of the episodes. We had, the program was broadcast scripts, so we knew what was said in most of them. We had the shooting scripts for all of them as they were shot. We had the location filming scripts, one of them, which again varied because I could see how they adapted what they were going to shoot and the script they went into shooting with versus what they actually shot, which always happens on filming when physical restrictions get in the way. For example, Walker had to go in and have his hair cut and his sideburns shaved. Well, how do you do that when you've then got to do the studio part of it later? So there were lots of different versions. So there was no real one. And also the lost episodes themselves, the scripts had been published. So there were these, in theory, inviolable records of what we should be making in the form of the published scripts of the lost episodes. But actually, subsequently, there was an off-air recording of one of them. Then we had the actual filming script of one of them. So there was multiple sources for the episodes. And we were very fortunate in that of the 3 episodes, they were very different from each other. The first one we recorded was, I think, 3 or 4 scenes and was 34 minutes long. The second one was 27 scenes and about 27 minutes long. And the third one, Under Fire, which was a series finale, involved a huge number of stuff. We had fire and water and everything, and stunts, all done in front of a live audience. And they did it, 50 years before, all in front of a live audience. We didn't. I cheated. I did some pre-recording because I wanted to honor what they ended up with, not the process they had to get there.
Yeah.
So they, for example, with the fire in Under Fire, there was an incendiary bomb comes through the roof of the hall, and there's a fire, and they try and put it out. They'd done it by having a fire in a separate studio, which they superimposed over their shot, so it looked like there was a fire in their studio.
Wow.
We pre-recorded certain elements so that we didn't have to do that. And we also, I think, the only lines we changed, and we were so careful to keep rigidly to the scripts, and I tried to copy as much as possible, work out the blocking of what David Croft had done from the camera script, so sort of working in reverse, trying to work out who he'd moved where, while I was trying to work with modern day actors who have input into all that, trying to work out how they'd staged it to mean that it would look not dissimilar or as near as possible to what could yet still be discovered. I don't want to turn around in 20 years' time and someone discovers the actual thing and it's hopelessly different, because I'm hopefully I'll still be alive, and I get a lot of criticism for that. So it was, there was a lot to it. We were fortunate. There were 3 very different episodes. There was an amazing cast, phenomenal crew, all of whom I'd worked with before in terms of the technical lot, a wonderful designer in David Pears, who was new to me, an extraordinary producer in Candy Julian Jones, Tom Webber, who I've known forever, who's a executive producer, and everyone around us was willing and aware and experienced enough to know how honoured and lucky they were to be there. Yeah. You really got that sense that everybody from every position knew how lucky they were and what a pleasure it was and what an honour it was to be doing it, and would really up their game.
Yeah. Yeah. I miss it, I have to say.
Yeah, it's odd, isn't it? Talking about it now, I haven't thought about it for a while. I'm in the middle of shooting at the moment. But the more I talk to you about it, the more I'm thinking, oh, what a time that was. What a magical time that was.
It was. It is, as you say, it would just give you goosebumps.
And actually, you know what, Tom, I was speaking to Tom the other day, and he said to me that he's got a copy of the Radio Times. We made the front cover of the Radio Times, and that's, I was talking to you earlier about Two Ronnies Night. So when I brought Ronnie Barker out of retirement for the first time to make Two Ronnies Night, the first BBC One theme night ever, we didn't get the front cover of the Radio Times. That's sort of the ultimate thing. We didn't get it then, but we got it with Dad's Army. So somewhere in Tom Webber's house is Gathering Dust. Is a copy of that amazing front cover recreation of the original cast with our cast underneath it of the Radio Times. So I look forward to getting it at some point.
It's phenomenal. My dad loved it, and my nana, she's such a big Dad's Army fan. They were in love with it. Is there a motto that you live by or that inspires you?
Several things come to mind when you ask that question. I think one of them would be what Terry Wogan used to say about the BBC, somewhat unkindly, given what an amazing career he had there was. That he often felt the BBC's motto was, "If it ain't broke, break it." My approach to comedy is I want it to make me laugh. And there's a lot of comedy which I think is phenomenal and beautifully written and fantastically observed, which is excruciating. And I remember talking about this to Jeffrey Perkins, now no longer with us, many years ago, about when, I think it must have been, well, when The Office, for example, was in its, it just sort of hit, was causing big ripples in comedy. And Jeffrey would say to me, you know, not funny is the new comedy. And, you know, who can deny the massive international success of The Office, both, you know, in England and in America? And Ricky Gervais's extraordinary skill as a comedian and a writer and an actor, actually. But a lot of what that has been about the comedy of observation and the comedy of excruciation, which is also true of, you know, Curb Your Enthusiasm and programs such as that. I've always liked laughing, and I love to laugh out loud. So I have a huge and abiding love of audience studio sitcom because it lives and dies on being funny or not, and being laugh out loud funny. And I like to make programs that make people laugh, and I like to enjoy making the program. And I'm currently doing a sort of slightly light comedy drama, and the moments of comedy are a huge relief to me and the cast, because drama can be very, very tiring and exhausting, and that depth of emotion. And you need truth in comedy, of course, because comedy doesn't work unless there's truth behind it.
Yeah.
But I think the skill in great comedy writers is very easy to underestimate. And I remember, funny enough, sorry, diverging from the question slightly, talking to Jimmy Perry about, or in fact, no, wasn't talking about it because he died at that point, but reading about what Jimmy had said. One of our programs that we made was Loneliness of a Long Distance Walker, where Walker had been called up, and the platoon didn't want him to be called up because he provided them with all their contraband. I mean, every single one of them had something they asked on him, whether it be nylons or whiskey or whatever. And simultaneously, word had got out that the platoon in London had, or the Whitehall, were looking for long-distance walkers to take part in a long-distance walking competition. So there was a lovely confusion around Walker the walker and Walker the person. So Mannering and Wilson ended up going into London to talk to to Whitehall about what Whitehall think of as a person who walks, and what Mannering and Wilson are talking about is a man called Walker.
Yeah.
And it's a lovely, you know, setup, a clever setup for a very confusing conversation, which was played beautifully by Rob Bathurst, Kevin McNally, Sam Phillips, and Chris Villiers, who I've just, funny enough, just worked with. Again, beautifully played, wonderful play on words, very, very characterful piece. And Jimmy wrote in one of his books that about this routine, which was, you know, based on the format of basically a musical routine, that he thought that his and David's writing had progressed a lot since they'd written that and become more sophisticated. And I understand that completely, but it slightly frustrated me because I think he completely underestimated how clever the writing was.
Yeah.
And how the setting up of the characters and the situation was so skillful that although, you know, it may on the face of it, be very contrived, the truth of it in the playing and the writing was extraordinary, and the effect was absolutely hilarious.
Mm. Each line just leads to something funnier, and it's building something almost like a twist as well, and it's a little bit mysterious, and that's, I think, what makes it so funny. The whole thing comes together and you realize that each step was so clever and purposeful.
Yeah, it's a
Yeah.
clever journey they take you on. It's an amazingly intricate web they weave, and you underestimate at your peril. It's like when you're a when you're at secondary school and you learn about Shakespeare and you think, oh, so long-winded, so dull, all these big fancy words. And then you're set by your wise teachers the task of condensing it or putting it into modern day English, and you suddenly find yourself using 3 times more words to do something which you'd considered to be verbose and overwritten.
Yeah, yeah. So genius. Yeah, there's a few other things you're working on.
Well, lots of fingers in lots of pies.
Yeah.
I've set up another company
Wow.
to produce and fund new content, which is taking rather much longer than we'd hoped. But I've got lots of exciting things in the pipeline, and it's frankly excruciating because Dad's Army took 3 years to get off the ground from beginning to making, and Umbrella Factory Film is now been, I suppose, only a year and a half, but and we haven't made anything yet.
Yeah.
So for all those writers out there and creators, it's stick with us. It's a long and torturous progress to get things off the ground and to get things towards production. Yeah, but it's exciting. It's exciting. There's a lot of really good stuff out there. We just have to get the momentum to get it made,
Yeah.
and pick your moment. Get the right people with you, and keep lots of things crossed.
Yeah. I think it's amazing because you really see something from the starting point. It's like the seed of it, and then you see it grow, and you get to go on that journey. Coming into something as an actor, and it's already been written, and there's all these stages that they've gone through, like it means so much to you, and it's very emotional. I imagine that if you've written something or if you've been something like from the very beginning, it's flourishing and growing before you, and you're a part of that. It's wow, like so much
It's
respect for that.
it is very investing, but it's also, ultimately, we're all in that. All of us who aren't the writers and the actors are in your hands. The writer has created it from nothing, and the actor brings it to life,
Yeah.
and the rest of us just sort of help nudge it in the right direction.
Yeah. It's all like a beautiful puzzle and like all the pieces. And they're also important and special, and they're all needed as well. Um, yeah.
Yeah, it's a hugely complex operation with lots of moving parts, and you just need to make sure you appreciate all the parts.
Yeah. I was like, no. Well, how did you find lockdown? Was that an experience did you write a lot and
I did write a lot. I'm not sure any of it's any good.
what?
None of it finished. I find I write better when I'm sad, so it did make me quite sad a lot of the time. Um,
Hmm.
I think the responsibility of homeschooling was at
Wow.
times overwhelming. Got 2 daughters at home, and I've always respected teachers because I've always known how important the teachers were in my life that taught me and how inspiring the best ones were. Um, I think it renewed my admiration for teaching in that the level you've got to be at to teach someone something is so much greater than they're at. Um, I like to think I'm pretty good at maths, for example, and English, but I was never really taught English grammar, and my daughters are learning stuff about grammar that I have no idea what they're being taught. Maths, for example, and I'm good at maths, but the way people are taught maths now is very different from the way I was taught it. So I got very frustrated with teaching, not with my children, but because I felt unable to teach them, because I wasn't sure how they were learning. So I found that quite difficult actually, because I think of myself as a good dad and and a good teacher. But I learned a lot about myself during that process, because I would get cross, and I was getting cross not with them but with myself, because I was unable to explain it to them in the way they could understand. Um, so that part of lockdown really hit me, and I actually progressed my own teaching and learning. So, and I've given a few lectures and consulted a bit on TV and film production in the past, and I pursued my um, endeavors in that direction and got my associate fellowship at the Higher Education Academy over lockdown, um, which was very, very hard work because it involves a lot of academic thinking and teaching, which the teaching part, the teaching, the instruction and the passing on of knowledge part involved a lot of remodeling of how I think about teaching and learning and the processes thereof, and a lot of language used that I wasn't used to using. Um, so I used lockdown well, the second part of lockdown, for that, and was quite pleased to achieve that sort of qualification. I got a qualification.
Yeah.
I think in many ways it was like being unemployed, for a while, which we all are as freelancers.
Yeah.
Because I'm blessed with a nice big garden and a dog who I can walk and go through the garden to a big park at the top of the hill. And even in lockdown, I could do that because there was no one there. So that was great. We had family to stay who were otherwise cooped up in London and had no space for 3 months or so. So that was amazing to be able to offer that. My mother was on her own, as she is, and very sociable, so she found it very hard. So many hilarious conversations trying to teach my mother how to use her newly acquired iPhone and then her newly acquired iPad. I think it was after 6 weeks.
Wow.
After 6 weeks, and of really, really bad missing of social interaction.
Yeah.
I just ordered her an iPad, online, and then went down and showed how to use it. So she could do her choir on Zoom and stuff like that.
Yeah.
It was difficult. I think COVID taught us all a lot about ourselves and about how much we need each other,
Yeah.
and who's got the really important jobs in life. And it's certainly not us. Although, funnily enough, the government, I think, was encouraging TV and film production back almost as one of the first industries to go back to work beyond those essential industries, which came to be properly recognized as what was essential.
Yeah.
So yeah, TV and film production started early, and then the continuing dramas and soaps and things were sent back to work long before the rest of us, under very, very strict conditions. So it was in many ways like being normally unemployed, but with added pressure of homeschooling and almost too much time to think.
Yeah.
What about you? How did you find it?
Oh, I was teaching children in China. I did that for 1 year. And that, just saved me actually, because I love children and it was online, and then their parents would often be in the background or next to them. And it was fascinating, like 4-year-olds counting to 100, and they were very sweet. And so that was like this beautiful, like light relief. I had like some health things going on. And that was just really helpful to find different ways to balance health and the body. And I went to astrology school and forever talking about it. And I think I just needed to do this. So it was an online school, and still now there's always videos being uploaded. So there's things to watch and learn. I got through it like that, to be honest. Yeah. But I found it hard. I think having that disconnection from people, as you say, and from work and from, I think we just had to sort of go within, all of us. Everything else is just constant delays and
It's really hard. It's really hard. It's crucifying on your mental health, this industry. It really is. Because one minute you're, I mean, I know what it's, I really get it. One minute you're being driven left, right, and center all the time, and everything you say is done, and you're being asked 1,001 questions, and everyone's listening to your every word, almost to the point where it's exhausting, completely exhausting. And you're, tomorrow morning I'm being picked up at 5:30, and I'll get back home probably at 8:30. This goes on for months, and then suddenly it stops, and you're back to real life. And then a few weeks after that, you've woken up from your jet lag of being in the bubble, and it's like, oh, bills to pay, and oh, I'm not special, and no one's listening to me anymore, and I'll never work again. What am I going to do with my life? When am I going to grow up and get a proper job? It's incredibly emotionally draining and demanding, and very, very difficult to maintain that level of just sort of sanity.
Oh, it is so hard. And I find it even from the audition stage. When I auditioned for Dad's Army, I called my dad after that audition saying, I don't think I did good enough. I wish I did this. Even that is emotional.
But that showed, and that's why you got the part. But it's both been involved in things where we've had interviews and you think they've gone brilliantly and you don't get it. I mean, you just don't know, do you? You really don't know. Every time my agent, and I've got a new agent now, asks me how an interview went, I say great. I always come away from an interview. One skill I've learned is to just be myself and give my best interview.
Yeah.
And be honest, because there's no point in BSing your way into a job and then then both parties finding out a few weeks in that you're not the right person for it. It's just pointless, because you've got to give so much of yourself and your soul and your energy and your life and your being to a project, which I know we both do.
Yeah.
It's utterly pointless not being honest early on. It's exhausting. And people get parts and don't get parts, and I feel this as a director as well, because I go for interviews in the same way that actors do, and don't get jobs that I think I'm completely the right person for and utterly destined to do.
Yeah.
And then I don't get them, and then you only get the crushing disappointment if they don't want me, but then you find out who got the job and you're like, what? but the overall picture is almost impossible to comprehend if you're not in it. So when an actor does or doesn't get a part, there's so many factors to that, in terms of the most bizarre things.
Yeah.
Someone's too tall, someone's too short, someone's too thin, someone's too wide. We've got someone who looks a bit like that, so we can't have another person who looks a bit like that, even though they're great for the role and probably the role as written. We've gone slightly left of field by giving that person the job, and therefore this person, who would generally be perceived as being exactly the right person's job, isn't under this circumstance because of that person. Or they want a holiday at that point and we can't do that. Or, there are so many random factors that affect it all, which we, as actors and directors, both are subject to, which we never know about.
It's nice to have that understanding, because for other people that aren't in the business, it's sort of like, oh, you didn't get the job? You must not be very good then, and it's like,
yeah, it's that simple. It's that simple. Like, comedy isn't, if it doesn't make you laugh, it's not funny. It's not a good comedy.
So true, yeah.
So easy to judge. Oh, you didn't get the job, therefore you must be not that good.
But you're right, there's so many things that come into it.
Funny enough, people came up not unconnected with the production for your part. The people who were connected to them asked afterwards, that's often happened in casting process, how come, what was it about Jerry Jane that made her get the part? And unsaid but implied, why didn't X, Y, or Z, for example, get the part? You'd put so much time and effort into how you approached the part and the audition that it involved very little thought. You'd made so much effort in terms of learning it, thinking about it. You had such good questions about it. You had an enthusiasm for it. You'd got your hair and makeup done in completely the right way for the part. You came into the room and it was like, oh, wow, okay, we've seen some big people for this. And, it's not the world's biggest part, but we saw a few people for it. And Jerry Jane came into the room and it was like, oh, well, there we are. No effort involved, really, from us over here, because we are being shown exactly what we want to end up with.
Oh,
And so it was a very easy choice. And it's I've never ceased to be humbled by the effort people go to approach castings, and I feel very sorry for those who don't get it, because inevitably in every casting session there are people who don't get it because not everyone can get every part.
yeah.
And casting for the thing I'm doing now, we've had small parts for police. No such thing as a small part, only a small actor. But parts with fewer lines for policemen and women, and you see people who've made their own uniforms, who have concocted a special device in the corner which has a blue flashing light across the screen. And it's it's genuinely heartwarming to see the amount of
Oh,
time and effort people put into it. And it's, not everyone can get the part, and you want to give everyone who does that much effort and who's clearly given that much time and love to it, you want to give them all the part, but there's only one part and there are several people up for it. And it's just part of the process. And I think it's really important for all of us to remember that it's not that we didn't get the part, it's someone else did. And it's not to think that we are bad or worse or in any way
mm,
inferior to that person, but they just happened to, on that day, at that time, with that look, height,
yeah.
anything, just slightly made them, that's what I need in the mix of the rest of it, because it's never, no part, be it the largest part with the most lines to the smallest part with no lines, no part exists in isolation. It's all part of one big project, and it's all to be taken in that context. And someone can be very, very obviously completely right for the part and not get it, because in the context, you can't have four people who all look identical playing different parts, because you've got to get a bit of a mixture of people in, because otherwise it just feels all the same. There are so many reasons, and I always say this to Catherine Willis, who did Dad's Army, is doing the project I'm doing now. He's our wonderful casting director.
Yeah.
This is clearly the person who we ought to give the part to. But on this occasion, we've got X, Y, and Z in the mix, and therefore we can't. There's too much physical similarity or height similarity or whatever. We can't end up with it. So we've got to go different on this one. Or we then have to go back to the drawing board and recast the others.
Yeah.
It's a hugely complex process. And one of the reasons I want desperate to act, and my parents who were both in the business persuaded me to go to university to get a degree. I read drama, thinking I was showing them, and I did quite a lot of acting at university. And one of the biggest thing that put me off acting was A, that I'm not that good, which is pretty important, but B, that I knew and I know that 95% of actors are out of work 95% of the time. And that I couldn't cope with.
Yeah.
Not only the ego side of it, but the physical activity side of it. I just have to be busy. I'm a busy person. I like to do stuff. And not being in work would drive me completely mad.
Yeah. My dad says this to me all the time. We're on the phone and he's like, I couldn't do it. I couldn't be in your industry. I couldn't be waiting around. And it's funny, you definitely do have to sort of create your own joy, I think, and your own passions. And I believe everyone's got them, it doesn't matter what it is, but if there's something that can get you through the day when you're not working, that's an amazing thing. And then when you do have the opportunities, if you can just walk away from it and say, I did all I could, I tried my best, then you'll either be right for it or not. Not an easy industry at all.
No, really, really not. And I've got loads of friends who aren't working at the moment, and at Christmas time I won't be working, and those are different conversations to have. And I know you've got loads of friends in the industry, of course, and loads of friends who are actors and loads of friends who are sort of behind the camera.
Yeah.
And there are times this industry has rarely been busier than it is now. But there's a huge amount of people in it, and there will be loads of our mutual friends and people we both know independently who won't be working. And that's the last thing you want to hear. Oh, we've never been busier, everyone's working, can't get crew, can't get cast. And thinking, well, I'm not working. What am I? Do I smell? Am I doing something wrong? It's difficult. It's difficult. There are more, if you look at the amount of product being made, of content being made, and the amount of studios being built in this country, never before has there been so much studio space being built, ever. I'm sure there's more studio space being built in the last 5 years than there's ever been built before in this country. It's just exponentially bonkers how much studio space is being built, how much content is being made. But there's a hell of a lot of people in the industry who aren't working, and at any one point, we're all not working. There are points in every year when none of us are working.
Yeah.
During those points, you've got to give yourself that break and cut yourself that slack and allow yourself that love and respect for yourself that says, no, it's fine. And keeping yourself on that even keel that says,
Yeah.
good things will come, and just do what you do and look after yourself and take a deep breath and enjoy the rivers and the mountains and the stars and the trees and nature and your family and all those constants in your life, because in 2 minutes time you'll be working and you'll have no time for them.
Yeah. It's so true to enjoy the quiet moments because we don't always have them. I think there's nothing worse than being unprepared. They're the only things we actually can control, you know. We are in control of those.
Important, that is important when you come. It's not necessarily important for an actor in a casting to know the lines, even if they're doing a self tape. It's more important that they're playing the part to the best of their ability.
Yeah.
But yeah, absolutely. When you turn up on the day, those actors who haven't learned the lines, and who regard that as almost secondary, are bonkers.
Mhm.
Because it's so fundamental, because the whole process is so involved, and what brings a film unit to the point of the sort of crew show of a scene and then recording it is a lot of time and money and effort on a lot of people's part. And it's incumbent upon the actor who's in front of them all, who is the most visible part of it, to do their part too. And if the lines aren't learned, that shows, in some ways, that shows a disrespect for the rest of the culmination of all these people's effort to bring it to fruition.
To be comfortable to step in front of even the self tape, I want to know the lines almost inside out. Then I feel like you can play with it more and you can try different things and you can like find different emotions. But if you don't know the lines and know what's happening and it's not in you, I feel like not prepared enough. And I just don't like that. I just don't like that feeling. It's like, if you turn up lately, that is such a sickening feeling to me. I would rather be an hour early.
No, I know, same here. But I think giving it thought, which is why you did so well in yours. I think it's doing your due diligence in any job is so important, and it shows also your desire to get the job and to be a part of the project, which is infectious, because everyone in every project wants it to work, and it's to everyone's best interest, whatever they're doing within that project, that it is as good as it possibly can be. So anyone can have a great idea, and everyone's got a contribution to make. And if you honor your own contribution first, then that's the most important thing, whatever that contribution is, because everyone's contribution in every aspect of production is important because it impacts everyone else's.
Yeah. That reminds me, my dance teacher at college, he would always say, I don't care if you're painting walls, if you're fixing radiators, if you're outside doing this, if you're dancing, you do it with passion. You do it with heart and soul. You always come at everything like that.
So
right?
you notice those who don't do it, you notice, on a unit which is 50, 60, 70 people, those who lack the passion, and whatever it is, as you say, any aspect, they stick out because everyone knows, and it doesn't take long. Doesn't take long for the unit to come together and think, okay, well, that's fine. They've got their own issues, they've got their own life, whatever it is, but they're not pulling their weight, they're not contributing, they don't really fire on all cylinders, they're not fully ocean going, whatever it is the metaphor you want to use. And generally speaking, a good unit will pull together and adapt and change, because on any one day, someone's going to be not firing on all cylinders for some reason, which isn't necessarily that they're not fully committed, but something else is going on in their world.
Yeah.
And it can be a very forgiving thing as well, the unit, you know, as a whole.
Yeah.
Um, People will change and adapt, and um, if you respect their contribution, if you then are unable to help them, or if you need to expect more of them and it's reasonable, they will, you know, if you've got on the right side of them and you've shown to be doing your job as well as you can and adapting and helping other people around you and working as a part of a team, then it's amazing what you can get out of people.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And if that fundamental just desire to be there is there,
Mm.
I appreciate you've got filming in the morning. And is tomorrow the last day of the week, or are you filming weekends as
Yes,
well?
no, off. Tomorrow's the last day, first day of the new location in the
Wow.
East End. And then we're back on Monday. We couldn't rejig our schedule to get Monday off, so we're working on Monday, which will be interesting because
Oh,
London will
right.
be in
Oh,
complete
goodness.
lockdown.
No. Oh my goodness.
Yeah, so that'll be a bit weird. Um, but there you go. I mean, it's quite something when aeroplanes are being stopped at Heathrow for this thing to happen.
Yeah. I
Yeah,
mean, I love the Queen, and I've been crying a lot.
hopeless wreck.
Oh, and the processions.
Oh, even just the sight of something as simple as a soldier with his head bowed.
Oh,
The motorcycle outriders, when they took the coffin into Buck House, they all lined up on their motorbikes. They all just pulled up on their motorbikes in a line, just bowed their heads. That was me for 10 minutes.
yeah.
Can't be doing with it,
Yeah,
honestly. Right, we should go, but this has been lovely, and please let's do it again and meet up at some point when we're not working.
absolutely would love to. Thank you so much for giving me your time tonight. And
And do let me know if you've got any other actual questions, because we just popping going. Bah, 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 bah.
yeah, but it's amazing, so interesting. Thank you so much. It's been a joy.
Real pleasure. Lovely to see you again.
You too. God bless.